You are listening to Groundbreaking Women in Conversation. True leaders of their field, pathmaker in the people making. Today I have the great pleasure to talk to Dr. Selene Kumin Vega. She is a licensed psychotherapist, a workshop leader, a dancer, as well as faculty in Saybrook University's College of Integrative Medicine and Health Science. In Dr. Stephen Gilligan's book, Walking into Worlds, she contributed a beautiful chapter, The Relational Self in Theory, Practice, and Community, where she describes much of her work. Through workshops, performances, lectures, directed groups, Selene has introduced movement and mind-body techniques to universities, hospitals, high schools, performing arts centers, and psycho-spiritual growth centers throughout the USA and internationally. Rightfully, to my delight and my presence, she received the special honor of the President's Award for Innovative Teaching from TSC Education System. To me, she is my trans dance sister,
Selene.
a friend,
Thank you
and
for
a true model
being
of
so
a beautiful
kind to
woman and human being.
agree to this conversation between the two of us.
I'm delighted to be here with you, Ava. I love our conversations, and I'm excited to see what emerges as we talk.
Yeah, me too. And I've given a little bit of an introduction of who you are, more on a technical level, maybe. But is there anything that you would like, on a personal note, to add in to who you are? And
it's something that I've said to students at various times, that sometimes we don't know along the way, when we think we've gone on some tangent that really isn't the right direction for us. And we take a look and say, oh, no, this isn't what I really want to be doing. Let me see if I can center here and find my true heart's path. And what I've said to many students is that those tangents aren't for nothing, that there's something that we gain in each one of them. And there's nothing I regret in all the different directions that I've gone to over the course of my life, because they have all been incorporated in what I do right now, even though some of them might not look like they were a direct path to where I've gotten to.
like some of the elements that the two of us are sharing is the background and the love for movement and dance, and using the body as a first language to help people open to a certain consciousness space or wisdom space. And we playfully called the trans dance sisters.
Yes.
And then we also share the culture and the connection in the generative change work, and particularly the generative trans work and self-relations work that was developed by Dr. Stephen Gilligan. So those are some of the shared paths that we have. And as you were saying, there's somehow a way where everything comes together, and it has its own way of coming together. I sometimes like to say you need to walk a certain path and maybe take a turn and look back in order to really understand how the story is totally making sense.
Yeah.
And maybe as I walk the path, it doesn't seem like it all the time, unless I follow this inner intuitive deep voice that is saying, yes, this way, or definitely not this way.
Yeah.
Is that something that you experience on your journey?
Oh, yeah. Well, I love the idea of like looking back from where you are and seeing where you come from. And one of the things that I see when I look back is the whole of it. You know, I'm not just seeing the path, but I'm seeing that winding path and all the territory that it was moving through, and how I took in and worked with whatever it was that I was gaining in each of those places, even if it might not look like some place that was a direct connection to what I'm doing right now. Mm-hmm. If I look at the whole, it makes sense.
Yeah, I can very much relate to the idea of walking the hero's journey, that every challenge, every obstacle is really presenting on one level maybe the demons that come up, and to use Joseph Campbell's words, and then the resources or the mentors, the helpers that actually in the dialogue and the combination of the two are helping us to lift and then really move towards deeper awakening or growth and consciousness raising. And your life path has really been a journey of awakening to me.
Well, as our all of our journeys, one would hope. And I think it's worth looking at that question of awakening, because I think sometimes people have the idea that awakening is something that happens, and once it's happened, that's it, and you're done, and you got it, you're awake now, and that it's just sort of this one moment of eruption of awakening. And I don't see it that way at all. When I look back through my life, I see the glimpses that I've had all along. Sometimes I didn't even know what they were about or where they were leading me, and it wasn't always clear how to get to the next step. It really is, in retrospect, that one can kind of put the pieces together and say, oh yeah, of course, that makes sense. And to see the places where little bits of awakening happened, where there was a recognition of something that made sense in that moment.
Yeah.
And certainly, I don't think there are very many beings on the earth right now that are in a constant state of awakening. We all move in and out of how conscious we can be in each moment. And for the best, I think if we can recognize that, then we're more able to see the times that we're not so awake and look back at it with some self-compassion and say, oh, how can I help myself be more awake in times like that, when I got pulled off of my center and I was not very conscious in that moment? And how can I bring more consciousness to my reactions and responses to situations like that next time? I think that's how we learn. And if we have the hubris to think that we're awake and conscious just because we had an awakening, I think we're forgetting something really important about the ongoing process that this is.
Yeah, I love how you said it, that it's not a done deal. Oh, I'm awake. Good morning, everybody. Now I'm awake, and that's it. It is more of a continuation of a process of unfolding, and maybe noticing the times when we're, as you were saying, when we're not awakened, when we're really in the automatics and crashing into a really unhelpful maybe habit or unhelpful behavior. I usually like to call them the kisses of awakening, and it may not be feeling like a nice slow kiss. Sometimes it's maybe one of those kisses you wish you didn't get. It may not always taste very good. But there certainly can be those moments of like, oh my God, where have I been? What's going on? To maybe embody a new commitment to practice, become more awakened. Do you have any of those practices that you use to, when you notice those moments, I'm falling out of the paradise?
I am continually impressed by how quickly the breath and tuning into my body can bring me back. And we talk about the movement that we do, and I'm a big fan of movement, and it's how I work most of the time. But even in stillness, because there is no such thing really, if you're in a human body, there's always movement going on. But it might look still from the outside, and tuning into that inner movement, tuning into the fact that I'm here in this physical body right now, and how does it feel to be here, and what is actually happening in this moment. And here's this breath, and even if I'm not paying attention to it, it's always there. I think for me that process of breath is so important, not because of a practice of specifically doing a kind of breathing, but of just recognizing in the moment oh, look, I'm breathing. You know,
Yeah.
look at that. My body is doing that all the time. And now what happens as I bring my attention to that breath? And I don't have to change it, although I might find that I want to, but it's a coming together of the part of me that was busy looking at other things and being distracted and being in reaction with the part of me that is ongoingly there for me, that is constantly there, this amazing body that keeps me alive without my conscious involvement at all. And how amazing when I bring my consciousness to that process. I would say that is my basic process. Whatever I'm doing, you know, I can be walking, I can be in the middle of talking to someone, I can be waking up or going to sleep or in the middle of distress. And when I do that, I'm right there in that moment.
Yeah, I love that you bring it really to the most basic and most simple. And I love that you're talking about breath. I just was reminded of Thich Nhat Hanh, the beautiful Buddhist monk, and one of his meditations is the breath meditation. And he says so beautifully, breathing in, I'm aware I'm breathing in, and breathing out, I'm aware I'm breathing out. And just inviting people just to recognize, just to notice that when I breathe in, all I do is that I breathe in. When I breathe out, all I do is that I breathe out. And in particular, these challenging times, I find symbolically enough that being able to breathe and allowing the notice to breathe, like letting myself know I'm capable of breathing in, I'm capable of breathing out, and I notice, has become one of the most precious gifts that honestly I have been taken for granted most of the times. And then I also realized breath in German means Atem, and Atem has the same root as Atman, which is the Sanskrit word for spirit. So there is also this beautiful filter connection of the mind and the body through the breath gets connected by spirit, and then creating this wholeness that we may sometimes forget when we're running on automatic and something else is happening. So thank you for bringing that. That's really, really nice.
I think the other practice that that feels really essential to me is self-compassion and compassion. Partly because in order to be present for the places where we're struggling, if we can't bring some self-compassion to those, then we're likely to push them under and not allow ourselves to be aware of them, which means that we can't change them. It means that we can't make different choices. Unless we can see the places where we're messing up and not doing it the way we would like to be doing it, then we're not going to be able to do anything different. And in order to be able to be with those, we have to be able to be with the shame that might come up at doing things that we don't feel good about. Because how else can we learn from them? So self-compassion becomes essential to be able to have a larger space to hold that behavior or reaction that we had, and to say, okay, that's how it was, and to have some caring for that being, myself, that young part of me that reacted in a way that wasn't skillful, but was all she could manage in that moment. And now let me see if I can help her learn some better ways to be.
Right. I saw you touching your heart as you talk about self-compassion. So I wonder if when you practice that, is there a certain movement you will do, certain sentences you will say to yourself that are really helpful to not just conceptually think about self-compassion, but actually kind of really practice it, so it's arriving from the mind into the body and really creates an experience that will be authentic?
I think the heart touch is a really important one.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell a story of my realization of how impactful that could be. I was at one point on a plane on my way back to be with my mother, who had been in a very serious car accident. And I really wasn't sure on that long plane ride whether she would still be alive when I got off the plane. And so there was a lot of distress going on.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'd been telling clients for years, put your hand on your heart, just hold, or wherever, find that place in you that's feeling the feelings and put your hand there to really bring a sense of bringing yourself to that part of you that has such distress or so many feelings. And that was just a conceptualization. I think until that moment when I did that with myself, because I knew it was the right thing to do conceptually, and I could feel how different it felt to have my hand there. Yeah. That I really did feel like I was bringing the part of me that was capable of holding and being there for another part. I was bringing that part of me to this very distressed part. Mm-hmm. And that it was meaningful to have that feeling of my hand there on my own heart. And after that, I found myself telling people, this may seem like it's a trite thing or it may seem silly, but do it anyway, because it can feel really meaningful on a level below that dismissal that your cognitive self is doing in the moment of how that feels silly. It's like, just do it anyway and bring your hand to your heart.
It's such a beautiful sharing, because it really also demonstrates so beautifully how you can be such a great teacher and know how to share the best things and give guidance and tell people this is what you do, and then life needs to happen in order to bring exactly the challenge needed so that I can remind myself to actually apply the resource that I've been offering to other people many times, and then kind of really testing out for real. Oh, this is really working, and it feels then it's almost like full circle. Now you have the compassion for others in terms and maybe when they're doubting, because you have both experiences.
Yes.
And that's then really walking the talk, right? You have that experiential pattern and tested it yourself.
Yeah.
That brings me actually to this idea. I was pondering on the fact that a lot of us are facilitators, are teachers. That's something we share. We have become leaders. I'm me in the Ericksonian field, but also in the Virginia Satir systemic field. And you're a professor at the university, so you're as well as a facilitator and also an author. So you have your voice, a leader, many, many ways. And it feels like now we as leaders, we as facilitators have collectively, as everybody else, been exposed to a challenge where now it feels like we're all invited to really apply the deepest learnings on an experiential level, not just on a cognitive thought idea level, but really like what are the different things that we know in our teachings that are really now important and needed to apply, needed to understand and experientially get to that, because it feels like, there's so much adversity now. There's so much, I guess, crisis in the sense of hopefully that to be a turning point. Do you have any personal experiences how you made insights in terms of what bringing to others? You now all of a sudden find yourself like, oh, okay, I'm doing this now and applying this. Any insights, surprises to your own self, so to speak?
I would say it's just about really continuing to develop the witness self has been the most important part of my own ability to take my own experiences and learn from them and begin to bring them into whatever else I do. Because it's in those moments where I feel like, oh my gosh, I well, I almost never feel like I'm completely lost in the experience, but when I'm feeling very overwhelmed by whatever it is that I'm feeling, whether it's distress, whether it's feeling abandoned, whether it's feeling alone, whether it's feeling like the world is too far gone, whatever I might be feeling, there's always that part of me that I've been developing really since my very young years, which is the witness self who can say, oh yeah, there you are. There you are, you're distressed right now. There you are, you're being abandoned right now. And in the midst of feeling that overwhelm, I'm also aware of myself feeling that overwhelm. And just how powerful that is, because it's like a constant companion who is all-knowing and compassionate and present for me, and who's like an anchor for me to grab onto, perhaps a life vest, you could call it, when I'm ready to stop flailing around in the waters that I'm drowning in, to know that it's right there, and that I can grab onto that realization. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make the pain go away necessarily. It doesn't make the situation change in that moment yet, but it changes the way I'm perceiving myself in that moment to have that awareness. And it's something that I've experienced many times, and each time there's this just awe, I think, that part of me manages to be there, and this gratitude for the practices that I've done over the course of my life to continue developing that, so that it is there for me in those moments when I might feel very lost otherwise.
Yeah, I sometimes call that this, like, the self-connection thread, almost like when you have that feeling, I'm drowning all the way down into the rabbit hole, or wherever we go. As long as there's a little thread of self-leadership, self-connection, that will allow me almost to wind back to the experience, and as you said, holding the experience, and at the same time noticing this is happening without the need to put it away, just being willing and capable, which to me is the best quality of mothers, like the grounded mothering quality of when a baby is in distress, just kind of saying, I'm here, it's okay, it will be fine, and how we learn to develop self-regulation. And not necessarily everybody had that in their growing up, but there's probably, as you were saying, there's practices that will help us to develop those mothering, self-regulating capacities. So it's almost one part that's suffering, another part that can be mothering that suffering part, and say, I'm here, I'm with you, it's okay, and I get that you're distressed. You don't have to be different than being distressed, that's fine. And sense how that energy then moves into another direction. Did you have an awakening moment where you first noticed, wow, I have that capacity? I can't believe it. That's amazing.
Not exactly, although I can, what's coming to mind as you were talking was an experience I had right after 9/11. Wow. I had, I with two of my very dear friends, we came together to just do some deep inner work together. And there was a point where we were each in our own space, here in the studio actually, just deep in our own wailing and being with the pain in the world, really. And I was kind of curled up in myself in that moment, and just feeling so deeply the pain of the world, not just my own individual pain, but just the screaming and crying of so many people, so many souls who are in such distress that they would do that kind of behavior, not just the victims of that behavior, but the ones who do it as well. It's like so much pain that could create that kind of thing. And in the midst of just feeling how painful that all was, I had this sense of what, come on, isn't someone gonna, it was like this baby is crying. There is this infant that is screaming and crying. Is no one going to go and pick up the infant that's crying? And I was reminded in that moment of back when I was maybe 11 or 12 and was babysitting for my little brother who was an infant at that time. And he was just crying and crying and crying. And I didn't know how to stop the crying, but I knew it was a little bit better if I carried him around. So I would carry him around and sing to him, sing lullabies to him. It didn't necessarily stop the crying again, but it felt like this is the best I can do. And at least I'm letting him know I'm here and he has my voice and all of that. And in that moment of feeling like, who's going to come and pick up this crying infant, I realized, oh, it's me. I have to do that. And so I started to sing in that moment for my two friends and for myself, for that part of myself that was feeling that pain, and for the world. That was the sense of, I'm going to sing this yearning lullaby of caring for the world, because even if it doesn't stop the crying, it's the best I can do right now, is to give my voice so there's something to grab onto when someone might be ready to, so that my little brother could, in that moment, at some point realize and look up at me, and we'd have this moment of connection where he could stop crying for a moment. You know? And I wanted to be able to do that for the world, and that realization that, yeah, I'm feeling it, but there's nobody going to come and pick up this infant but me, and that I have to do that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so moved that you share the 9/11 story and how that's connecting to this epiphany moment of you as a 12-year-old and having this brilliant idea of honoring your limitations and just knowing that if I just hold him, if I sing for him, that is just now the best I can do. It may not change it, but it's the best I can do, and I would be willing to do it and offer it, and how those two come together. I mean, it feels like great internal family therapy on one level, and this great awakening of this younger self / older self, because obviously she was there before you and how they align with the wisdom. Sometimes we are facing moments in relationship to the world that the best thing we can do is just to give the most beautiful, most loving, most holding voice or dance or whatever expression there may be to give it a space, but we may not be capable of stopping the unstoppable. Yeah. So what is your wisdom of what is the best thing we can do right now, knowing that basically there's nothing we can really do at the moment to fix things, really, but being with the uncertainty?
I really do think it's about bringing that awareness back again and again. I know I feel it when I'm listening to the news or listening to someone telling me about the news, and feeling how easy it would be in those moments to just slip down into complete despair.
Yeah.
And what keeps me from doing that is, first of all, stepping back from it. I feel like in those moments I've got tunnel vision, and I can only see the pain in that moment. And if I can open that up a bit and have some perspective of a bigger picture that I'm only a small part of here, and that the time that we're in right now, this moment in time, is really just a very, very small part of, that there are waves of history behind us and waves of future possibility in front of us. And in this moment, the more I can keep that spaciousness of possibility open, and not go into the despair place, but just into the, what can I do in this moment? What's the best I can do in this moment?
Yeah. I've been noticing that being quite quite vividly that I was touching at one point a place where I really felt I was kind of collapsing by the pain of the world and the many brokenness that I felt, the having left paradise and being in this duality and fighting for the right ideas and right opinions and what's the right thing to do, and I just felt helpless in this moment, and just overwhelmed by there's so many things. We're not looking at the big picture, but I felt I'm just way too small to create that big picture, and that's true. So I was reminded of myself to really allow to crack open and feel the pain that I felt for the world, and how I'm not liking what I see in the world, a lot of it, and also noticing what I would like to see more of in the world in the future, in terms of really coming back to our true nature, hopefully collectively, and then just kind of go to the next connection I have, and like, what is my range of power where I can really have a next conversation, a next connection, and that may have the ingredients that I hope we collectively develop more of, which to me is opening conversations, opening multiple voices, opening to dialogue, opening to many different perspectives that will be valid equally, and find new ways of creativity that comes of multiple opinions and multiple disciplines.
Yeah. I love that you're seeing it as the connection, that what is the next connection to make, because I do think that's such a big piece of what has to happen, that none of us can do it alone, that it really is a community effort. And each time I find myself coming together with other people, whether it's one-to-one like this, or whether it's part of some big group Zoom gathering together, there's this deep sense of gratitude of what happens when we come together, that realization that we're not alone, that sense of our energies becoming more than what any one of us, or we're more than the sum of the parts when we come together in that way. There's a strength and a resiliency and possibility of movement that can happen when we bring all of what all of us have together. Now, I will say here that those gatherings that I'm part of, generally we're all pretty much on the same page in terms of how we're seeing things. And I think our real challenge is how do we come together and bring compassion and bring that sense of inclusion to the places where what we see in someone else and the behaviors that they're doing and the choices that they're making seem to be taking us into places that don't look good. How do I not just go into the us and them? You know, how do I manage to somehow connect with some essence part that's underneath what might look pretty dark? And that feels like it's the challenge right now. And I want to be careful to not just bask in the sense of unity and community that I love, that's really important, that nurtures us, that's what makes life sustainable, but to also venture into those territories where I'm trying to also connect with those who feel unconnectable with. And that I really do think is our challenge here.
Yeah, I do find that a really big meditation practice, like in the out, not going inside and meditating for yourself, but really putting it out in action and dialogue to really live and experientially make the difference between the personhood of somebody else and their behaviors and their opinions, and not just hold it as a nice concept. There is a person and then there's a behavior, and that to differentiate between the two, but really hold the difference between, here I can stay connected to your spirit and to you as a person, and on that level we're equally true and valid, and we are the same. But I may have a clear opinion about how you say things or how you behave and how you act on, and I'm usually hoping that I can find enough curiosity to get to the longing that is behind the behavior. How does it play out, and how is that learned in terms of copings in a stress situation, and so that I can hopefully find a way to the longing that's behind the behavior and not get caught up and make the behavior the person. But I find that sometimes quite an expensive challenge. It needs a lot of practice.
Yes, exactly. And I think we really do need to have the nurturing of each other to help us with that practice, and rather than I guess getting caught in supporting each other in creating more division, which is easy to do. But we have to have those places where we connect and feel nurtured by it, in order to be able to venture into the places where it's harder to feel that.
Yeah. Well, just in finishing, I'm trying to keep the recommendation of the social distancing, which I find a debatable term, like the physical distance.
No, physical distancing is, I think, a much better term.
Yeah. So I'm trying to take symbolically the physical distancing, and kind of translate it also to when we have to do this right now. And to me, I'm noticing I'm really missing physical connection, like hugging people and really holding a hand, or touching in an unfiltered way, where that's just where we just have a permission. And I know who else of my friends would love to do that too, but there's such care. But at the same time, I'm sensing now that we all have to do it, and is there a message in that will help us to be a little bit more careful, generally speaking, about how quickly we maybe move into the space of somebody else? And that can easily be done verbally. I may have a good physical distance, but how quickly are we verbally in the space of somebody else and making assumptions about them and judging them and all of that? So I'm hoping that now that we're physically distanced, we can maybe take a little bit of a learning seat here, how to translate that into appropriate, proper communication pattern that are more human and more respectful and more healthy and more health promoting, so that the conversations of the differences really can take place in a healthy way. And I'm definitely wanting to put in my effort to do it in the best possible way, step by step. I think that's work in progress. It's not done like the waken. It's not your waken and that's it, but it's a kind of work in progress.
Yeah, I like that. And I think that's a great way to use this time of separation to become more aware of what it is we bring into our connections with others, and maybe to also use this time as a way to practice our own self-care in ways that then we're not depending on each other for the caring we need, and can come to each other from a clearer space because we're not so needy, because we're learning to take care of ourselves in a way that allows us to come more as more whole beings to each other.
Yeah. So being awakened to our own self and having a commitment to stand by our own side and not needing to have somebody else to take care of that. That would be a really nice world to create, wouldn't it? Well, thank you so much for your wisdom, for your insightfulness, and just what an amazing woman and an amazing human being you are. I always
thank you, Eva. You bring out such I love what came out of our collaboration here, and I think that's what makes it work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
me too. So thank you so much for your precious time and all. Also the practical nuggets that were so, helpful and easy to apply. So it's great awakening, Jules.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for connecting with me.
And I just love you. You know
I
that.
love you too, and I'm so glad we have this way to connect.
Yeah, me
And
too.
yeah,
Thanks for
yeah.
sharing. Bye.
Bye-bye.